All right, welcome everyone. Welcome, and assalamu alaikum to all of the Muslim community who will be joining us today. My name is Zarinah El-Amin. I am a publisher with a program called Book Power Publishing, and we are launching a series of interviews with our elders, which has been called At Their Feet. So this is kind of like elders speak. And today I have one of our newest authors with us, and we're going to talk about his book. We're going to talk about some of his life, and we're going to talk about the work that he is so passionate enough to dedicate hours and hours and hours and months and months and months and years and years and years into putting together for us in the community. So let me tell you a little bit about what's happening over here in Book Power Publishing World, and then we're going to jump into the interview in a minute. So for those of you who are new to us, Book Power Publishing has been in existence, I think, for the last maybe since 2010-ish. So what's that? Over a decade now, right? Coming up on almost a decade and a half of work helping people to bring their ideas and their thoughts out there into the world. Well, right now, Book Power Publishing has decided to focus specifically on a new project, and it is called the Legacy Keepers. So, the Legacy Keepers is where we want to help the elders and families capture the wisdom, stories, experiences, the life skills, the lessons learned of the elders in our community. And I should say, kind of before it's too late, if you will. For far too long, we have allowed all of the wisdom that people have gleaned over decade upon decade upon decade upon decade. We have not been capitalizing on that knowledge, and we allow it to just go to the wayside. And then we wonder why our communities look the way that they do, right? And from the family perspective, we have allowed Big Mama and Big Daddy to pass without capturing their family history. And so the children and the children's children don't even know that with which they came, right? They don't even know who they came from. They don't know the decisions that contributed to who they are and their family, like the big things that make them who they are. So this is why this Legacy Keepers project is so important. This is why this Legacy Keepers work is critical to the evolution of us as a community and such, right? And so those of you who are interested, I'm going to invite you. I'll find the link and then I'll put it into the chat box. We're doing the training on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday. We're going to be doing a training around legacy writing, around memoirs, around autobiographies, around creating a legacy book for your family, right? That can be passed down from generation to generation. We want to help our communities capture the stories, the knowledge, the wisdom, the experiences of our elders, right? Before it's too late. So now for those of you who are just joining us, I want you all to type into the chat box and let me know where you're joining us from. If you know me, then you know I am big on connection, right? I am super big on connection. I am super big on us knowing and creating an energetic field, if you will, so that we have good people putting out good energy in many places. That way we can kind of combat some of all the stuff that is going on and happening out there into the world, right? So type into the chat box where you're joining us from, and then share this out. This is going to be the debut interview, if you will, for our client, Dr. Hameed El Amin, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful intellectual and academic and all around good person who is doing and sharing the knowledge that he has gleaned over the years with the community, right? And that is what we're going to get into today. So go ahead and share this broadcast out on your page, because you never know who may pick up something from this interview. And I have learned now that when I'm doing interviews and when I'm watching podcasts or when I'm listening to different people speak, I don't try to grasp every single thing anymore. I look for like that one thing that I can take away and add to my body of knowledge and then act on that one thing. right? So you're going to be looking for one thing today that is speaks to you, right? One thing that you can add to your body of knowledge and then pass that out to your the way that you act, the way that you do this thing called being human, right? That is our goal for today. All right, so we have his daughter in the house, the other Dr. El-Amin. Look at Dr. El-Amin setting a precedence for his family. He said, we're going to make some doctors up in this piece. So, Atlanta in the house. Welcome, 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 welcome. Super proud of all of your accomplishments as well, daughter. All right, so we're going to be getting started in about 1 minute or so. I want you all to just go ahead and share this out on your page because today we're going to be talking to Dr. Hameed El-Amin, and we're going to be talking about his book, but we're also going to be getting into some behind the scenes of how his mind was cultivated to even get to the point of writing this book, right? Like, what are some of the things that contributed to his makeup over the years that led to where we are today with this publication of his latest book. And I'm going to share the book with you all. It is Adam, the Universally Evolving Human Soul, Male and Female. We're going to get into the subtitle in a little bit, but I want to share that is the subject of today. So if you're wondering, what do we mean by Adam, the Universally Evolving Human Soul? Universally evolving human soul. That's what we're going to get into today. So, those of you who are just joining us, come on in, drop into the chat box where you're joining us from, because we are going to be sitting at the feet of our elders. And today it is Dr. Hameed El-Amin. Dr. Hameed El-Amin. All right, let me see. What time is it, y'all? What time is it? What time is it? We gave you all a couple of minutes to come on in. I think we should be good to go. So I am going to read a bit of Dr. El-Amin's bio, and then I'm going to bring him to the stage. So, first of all, he doesn't call himself the author. So, I'm going to use the language that Dr. Hameed uses, right? He says, the writer scribe of this series. Hameed El-Amin is a retired college and university level psychology and social science teacher who facilitates work for the development of education for schools. Dr. El-Amin has clinical, counseling, teaching, and consulting experience with varied populations from children to adults in Massachusetts, New Jersey, Alabama, and Michigan. Dr. El-Amin earned a BA from Morehouse College. That's my brother's alma mater. But Dr. El-Amin, I have to tell you, we beat you. Howard played Howard played Morehouse yesterday, and we knocked y'all out the water. So, bye-bye. All right, a master's of science degree in biological psychology and a PhD in clinical and social ecology from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. All right, Dr. El-Amin has worked with the Mosque Cares education team under the leadership of Imam Warfdeen Muhammad, radiallahu anhu, and currently works with the Sister Clara Muhammad Memorial Education Foundation and Clara Muhammad Schools Consortium established by Imam Muhammad prior to his passing. Dr. El-Amin works with organizations supporting education for developing community schools from California to Bermuda, as well as local, national, and international education and interfaith efforts. Dr. El-Amin is also a veteran of the Vietnam War, where he served as a combat infantry officer. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. El-Amin to our beautiful legacy keepers at their feet interview today. Welcome, Dr. El-Amin. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, dear sister Zarinah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for giving us the time to come on a Sunday afternoon and talk to us. I appreciate you.
Well, I certainly appreciate you. You've been a tremendous help to me in getting this effort finished, and actually inspired me to do more.
Woo!
So I've known you and your father and your mother for some time, but only casually. But it is a real pleasure to work with you. Thank you. You've done so much. I can't even express my gratitude. Thanks to Book Power Publishing and your efforts.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you trusting us, with your work. I want to talk about your life, but I actually want to start just with this book, and then we'll go back to your life if that's okay with you. Um, because this is a heavy piece of material right here, right? This is a heavy piece of material. So we have Adam, the universally evolving human soul, male and female. Let me read from the back of the book for a moment. You said mankind has long struggled archetypally for a unifying spirit of reason and logic based on universals that will satisfy the human soul as a plural body. This inherent yearning for peace for the human soul has been evolving since Adam was created from clay and molded into shape. Was created from clay and molded into shape. Inherent yearning. So, Dr. Hameed, what do you mean by that? That mankind has long time struggled and we have some type of inherent yearning?
Words, first of all, we say words make people.
Mm-hmm.
Inherent means what we're born with, what we are created with, even more so than what we're born with, because we were created by the God of all of us. And that is what is suggested by the idea of a plural body. That is, it's the same God for all of us, no matter what we think about how the story goes or how it's told or what it means, because He is the author, as you referred to. We are always the students, and we're always learning. So the title suggests that this is an ongoing process. That is the evolution of Adam, again, words, meaning that the potential that we were created with is still unfolding, and it is from our first father, the father of all mankind, Adam, plural, as a plural body, meaning both male and female, who are created from one soul. We are all created from one soul.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this inherent yearning for peace, what can you expound upon that portion? Like the yearning for peace. Are you saying that that we are having some type of internal dissonance or internal angst, if you will, and we're constantly trying to go for that baseline of peace?
Yes, that is the yearning in the soul. It is also inherent. Um, that we are obligated to that peace by the nature of what God created in us from the beginning. We call it in uh, our language taqwa, that is the fear of God. But we can go back and hear. I can hear my ancestors literally, uh, who were Christian, saying that when they talked of putting the fear of God in you. And I would put it a little different, keeping the fear of God in you, because we're all born with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the confusion comes when we when we lose that sensitivity in our nature, in our behavior, in our conduct.
Mm-hmm. So when you say like your ancestors, I remember in the book you have a story about that. But what do you mean when you say you can hear your ancestors? Are you talking about not some spooky like you hear, thousands of years and people talking to you, right? But are you speaking about your grandma? Like what do you mean when you say you hear the ancestors mentioning that?
Well, I was hoping you would ask me this because I, s- I sat in my great grandmother's lap,
Mm,
who was born a slave, 1860.
mm,
She was 5 years old when slavery ended. I say that so that we get some perspective on what aging and what being an elder and what being wise means. And I can give you the spooky version of it because her memory came to me um, first at two different graduations.
Mm-hmm.
One for my youngest daughter at her high school graduation, and then later at my second oldest daughter at her college graduation.
Mm-hmm.
And it came out unexpectedly. I was sitting there in the audience, and the memory of sitting in her lap and touching her face came to me. But that memory is not something, although it came to me in this way, out of my, I would say, out of my soul, that means it's there. Now, science actually supports that. We call it, um, um, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the term now,
Generational memory or something?
generational memory, but there's a scientific basis for
Mm-hmm.
it. That is, those memories are literally clocked into our genes. Now, there's a lot more to say about that we can think about because we think of our nature and our behaviors being confined to this reality. But those who believe, no matter what your belief is, almost certainly, you
Mm-hmm.
believe in something before this reality that we're living and something that's going to occur after this reality when we
Mm-hmm.
leave it. And in between, we're having this experience that really is a contest for our souls in terms of achieving that peace that every soul wants, every soul, regardless of who, what, when, where.
Mm-hmm. I think I appreciate you allowing us to let that land for a moment, as far as the connection to this transatlantic slave trade and slavery, right? Because here we have someone who sat in the lap of someone who was enslaved, right? And we try to, in this country, pretend that it was so long ago that we should just be getting over it and never remember it or never talk about it at all. It's like that was like, centuries ago, but it's actually not. And then also what you mentioned as far as the memory, right? The memories that are passed down from generation to generation are within us. And as you said, deep within our soul. So sometimes there are things that we are feeling called to, and we don't really understand what they are or why. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. We say it in lots of ways. One of the ways that it's said is in the idea that those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. Those who don't recall or preserve their memory may be a better way of saying it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what a legacy is. It's that which has been passed down to us that connects us with what we were made from the beginning, not just from the genetic memory of our ancestors, but all the way back to the first mind, which is Adam. Adam is really our first mind
Mm-hmm.
in every human being. And we're constantly trying to, that mind or that intellect, maybe is the better way to speak of it, was created by God, and we're constantly returning to it. Some of us may not think of it that way, but once we lose that, then we've lost our inherent nature, and of course, that is the context that we have in the world. So we have to keep connected to our history. And speaking of us as African American people, we're cut off entirely from it. In fact, not just in terms of our own history and our culture, our souls were cut off from their inheritance that had been evolving in the context of African culture for who knows how long, thousands of years. We were cut off from that. Our soul was cut off from that and reinvented, given a new language, given new customs, given new culture. So that's what we're returning to, even if we think of it in secular terms, in terms of knowing that our soul needs to be connected with what God created in us, and that needs to be kept. That needs to be kept as the focus for everything that comes out of us in terms of what we do, in terms of trying to establish ourselves in a world that is aiming at the peace that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And are you speaking specifically about African American community at this time?
Actually, it's every human being, Every human being has a connection with that original nature. And although we are, as our scripture says, different nations, tribes, and peoples, God has created us that way to get to know each other. And of course, that's not always the case. We can see that in our confused world now
Hmm.
because we have gotten so far away from our original nature. Yes, from that first nature that
Hmm.
every human soul is created with, male and female, black, white, blue, green, other. Every soul is created the same.
So, Dr. Hamid, let's go back a little bit. You know, like you painted this beautiful picture, this memory of you sitting in your great grandmother's lap, right? Stroking her face. That like soul memory, you know, that is there for you. Can you tell us a little bit? I'm interested to kind of know more about how your mind developed, if you will, right? Like how you got to this stage of being such a deep thinker and someone who takes language and really like analyzes it at such a deep level. So can you take us back a little bit? Like tell us more about your childhood, where you grew up and what your childhood looked like.
That memory kind of captures my experience in a nutshell at 80 years old. And I always tell my own children 80 is not like 40 because you really, in looking back, one of our leaders, one of our imams, told me it's only when you get to a certain point in life that you can look back and see what your life is really all about and what its purpose is. And I
Mhm,
believe we call that wisdom. Wisdom, that's what we call it. And
mhm,
wisdom has to be earned by living. It doesn't come just from studying. It doesn't come from just learning in the book sense or achieving things in terms of what the world recommends. It's those lessons that are the hard earned lessons of living your life and looking back and seeing what has become of you,
mhm,
even as you are leaving. Now, there's a whole lot to say about that because that is the urgency that most elders live with. And that's the opportunity that you all have made with Book Pile Publishing, your team, and
mhm.
your efforts in preserving. And that is so precious, especially of those of us who are facing that. But looking back, I was raised in Alabama. Um, and Alabama is a curious story by itself because people don't really know the real story of Alabama.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, going back to my own childhood memories from what I learned from those in my mother's family, especially about living in the South, you had to get you only got what you earned. You had to work for it because those were your circumstances. And even in some sense, you were left alone to do that. And especially in this state, and I'm going to say it very succinctly, but nobody will really get it unless you study.
Mhm,
Uh, Before a certain period of time, really in the 60s, Alabama was the most liberal of all the southern states. And you can see that by what came out of this state in terms of the people that is produced. And part of that was due to the fact that Booker T. Washington was invited to come from uh, Hampton University, where he had studied as a
mhm,
young man, and founded Tuskegee, what is now Tuskegee University.
mhm,
That is where I grew up, living with my cousins. There were a whole extended family of us who lived with my grandmother in her house, and her house was 100 meters from the chicken coop where Booker T. Washington had his first classes. I played on that monument growing up as a child. Those are my earliest memories.
mm,
And that's the my grandmother's house was located on that street, which is called Church Street. And I grew up in that soil, in that environment. And when I say soil, I'm referring to the fact that we all come from a specific environment
Mm-hmm.
that produces us, just like plants grow.
Yeah.
There's a lot to say about that. Uh, but you grow up, when you grow up like that, you grow up not even knowing the meaning of what you're inheriting. You're just a child
Mm-hmm.
playing in that place, not knowing that in this place that was a chicken coop where this great effort started, and where, just to kind of hint at its long-term effects, now there are more HBCUs in the state of Alabama than any other state
Mm-hmm.
because of that. And that's the tradition that has allowed us to engage in grassroots efforts throughout our community life as African Americans in this country, is that tradition. Now, there's another part to it. We all know about Dr. Du Bois and Dr. Washington having different points of view, but Dr. Washington was starting at the beginning where human life starts. So
Mm.
that's where I started, not knowing the meaning of it in the sense that I'm explaining it to you now. My parents, however, my mother was born and raised in Tuskegee, but my parents were educators and they lived in North Alabama in a city called Florence, Alabama, which is part of what they call the Muscle Shoals area that people may know from its connection to Detroit,
Okay.
and people like Aretha Franklin,
Uh-huh.
who cut her first record there at Payne
Oh.
Studios. Yes, in this little small town called Florence.
Hmm.
Now, there's a lot to say about that, but I won't even go into that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you who are really deep thinkers, you may appreciate the fact that Florence is also the sister city of Florence, Italy, which is the city of the modern Renaissance, where it began.
Mm.
And so now I'm just telling you what I've come to understand.
Mm-hmm.
But in looking back, actually, Ma'am Darnell Kareem told me this, who's one of our elders. I think he's probably in his 90s yet, now. But he told me that. He said, it's only when you get to a certain age you can look back and see the meaning of these things that are there for you personally, that make you more than just what you are as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
The inherit of things that you may or may not understand, that may or may not be even part of your memory.
Mm.
And that's why it's so important to keep these things, because those circumstances create all of us, create all of us. And I think you mentioned that I had the privilege of an education. I had the privilege of an educated background. My grandfather was, on my mother's side, was in the first graduating class of Tuskegee Institute,
Mm.
one of 6 people. He also was the pastor of the
Wait,
church.
one moment. I just want to let that sit in, sometimes, because when we see institutions nowadays and we see how big they've gotten, sometimes we forget the evolution of those institutions. Just like you're talking about the evolution of the human soul, like that institution, you said your grandfather was one of the first, was graduating class, and there was 6 people, right? And so I just want to kind of put that for all the entrepreneurs and people who are trying to do different things. And sometimes you start off with very small numbers and you feel that it's insignificant, and you feel that it's not a big deal in this world of millions and millions of followers and everybody having billions of views on YouTube and all of these things. But when we look back, we're talking about an entire institution that changed the trajectory of education for Black people in a country. And this particular university started with 6 people. So I just wanted to kind of help us to note that in, um, to remind us of growth, right? And to remind us of the importance of the things that we do. Okay, so now, yes, you said your grandfather was in that first cohort, and then continue from there, please.
Yes. And they started in a chicken coop that they had to clean out in order to have the classes
Wow.
that they had. And if you know Tuskegee people, they still have that kind of pride of starting from nothing.
Mm,
And we all started from nothing. We
mm-hmm,
know that from scripture, that we started from absolutely nothing. As our book says, a mere clot of blood adhering,
mm,
adhering in the wombs of our mothers.
mm,
Yes, that's how we started from nothing. And so that tells us, that, I think to me, now that you brought it up, that we can start from nothing and progress and become what Allah has intended, what God has intended, and start from nothing all over again. And that happens all the time. History is constantly repeating itself. Nations evolve, people evolve, tribes evolve, communities evolves, nation evolves, they decline, and then civilization rises again. So that's the story of every human being. It's not just the story of some. It's the story of those who were Africans who were brought here, who were reduced to nothing, almost nothing. Nothing but our soul was left, and a bit of the spirit in us that God had left intact in us and preserved in us that kept us focused on His redemptive power, and for us not to lose that. And that has led us to where we are in this country in terms of being able to challenge this country to be the best that it should be, because it is inherent in every human soul. So it's not only the story of us as African American people, it's also the story of this country and its inheritance, where we have been the ones who have struggled to remind this country that everything that is in human nature is in every human soul, African American, black, white, blue, green, or other. And we're the ones, in terms of our identity, that have asserted that kind of freedom.
mm, mm. I tell you, Dr. Hermie, one of the things that I am so thankful that God gave me this ability to do this particular work is because every time I sit with a client, like every single time, I learn a lot. And I'll tell you, like with your book, I remember in the beginning, I was nervous, right? Because your usage of language, right? Your understanding of concepts is at such a deep level that I had to go back and read some paragraphs like 15 times, right? Just to be able to fully understand what it is that you were saying. So I think the level gets to a level where not a lot of us think at that deep level. And I'm just wondering where that came from for you. Like, not all academics, even go to that depth and think about these concepts and try to understand why it is that humans act the way that they do, or how racism and all of these inherent these things come about. So where did that come from for you though? Like, were you always that way, or did you have someone come into your life that sort of helped you to start develop your mind that way? Where did this depth come from?
From the red clay soil of the South. That's the metaphor of Adam being made of clay, as we all are.
Mm-hmm.
And part of my effort, especially as I pursued higher education, graduate level education, was made easier when I realized the lesson that my mother always reminded me of when she charged me with having lost my common sense.
As a kid.
As a child, yes, yeah, boy, you lost your common sense when you would do something that you hadn't thought through,
Yeah.
maybe that you weren't aware of,
Yeah.
either in terms of the consequences of any sort, morally, intellectually, because as a child, you're just doing things out of your spirit. But that cautioned me not to lose my common sense. And I can tell you, in one of the first classes in graduate school I was taking, it was you can appreciate this, and those of you who sat through it can, a class in learning theory, which is very much a different kind of a language. And I said to myself, "Oh, this stuff is too hard. How am I going to get through this? This language doesn't make any sense to me." And then I said to myself something that came from that memory of my mother telling me I didn't have my common sense. Just use your common sense. So I started to think in terms of just plain people and how they thought of things with the wisdom that they had earned through just living. And I realized that it is in the common sense, everyday language of living, even though we make it complex. That is what got me through all of the coursework that I had to take to get to this point. And so that was something in my spirit. Now, here's something to understand, because in studying, especially lately, I've come to understand that your intellect does not begin with your brain, it begins in your spirit. Now, there's a lot to say about that, but that's what intuition is.
Mm-hmm.
That is knowing what you know when you don't know how you know it. Now, the sense of that is that knowing is in every human soul
Woo!
from the beginning, that ability.
Mm.
Adam represents all of the potential that evolves, that leads to everything that we know as human life and human civilization. It all comes from Adam, and we're all made from Adam. So when we keep that first mind, when we lose touch with that first mind, we lose our civilized life, we lose our civilized direction, and common sense the base of that, especially intuition. So that's a lesson that we're still pursuing, as you mentioned, in our work with education, which is really what this book is about. It's about preserving for the future. For those of you who are going to come, I'm serious. I'm thinking of your grandchildren
Mm-hmm.
and your great grandchildren, and my daughter. I think one of them is on, who just finished her degree,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm doing this for her daughter and her grandchildren and her great grandchildren,
Mm-hmm.
because this connection that is inherent in every human soul has to be kept, or we lose touch with our inheritance, with our legacy as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's your work.
Hmm.
What I'm so grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And I know many of the people in Detroit that you have preserved their memories, having lived there off and on for a period of time over my now getting to be long life.
Mm-hmm. Alhamdulillah.
I'm just very grateful. I'm very grateful.
Yeah, and we are for you as well, because you're talking about that line you said about the intuition, right? And the fact that it's knowing something but not knowing how you know it, right? Knowing something without knowing how you know it. So we have all of this knowledge that's inside of us that is just waiting for to be unlocked, right? And that's really what the book is trying to do. It's trying to help us unlock that knowledge so that we can contribute to a better society overall. And in here you have a lot of different things that you break down, as far as like, what do we call it in here? The word, I'm trying to find one real quick. The word study. The word study. So this was one thing that I really appreciated about your work, because throughout the book, you all, Dr. Hameed has a lot of it walks us through kind of like mind, it walks us through cultural ideas, it walks us through cultural insanity, it walks us through like the sciences and such. So it walks us through all of these different things. But what Dr. Hameed also did was, like, he helped us to understand more about the way that he takes certain words. Like we all have the same dictionary. All of us have the same exact dictionary, these same words, right? But what messages get conveyed depends upon the order of the words and how we actually organize these things, right? So Dr. Hameed in his work breaks down also not just like the ordering of the words or such, but like where the words came from, but in a unique type of way. So I want you to just explain real quick, like why you do this word study and why the word study was so important in here. And let me give an example real quick. Let me pull one out. Let me pull one out. Let me see. Okay, so we'll do Genesis, right? So you said Genesis, gen equals spirit. Gen equals spirit plus IUS equal belonging to, generative power, spirit, inborn nature. And then you go into like the innate inborn spiritual nature, the fullness of the metaphysical origin and evolution of the soul nafs as expressed in the innate human potential of the spiritual nature. So this kind of is one similar to what you mentioned about, but like, why did you do all of this word study and kind of really breaking it down into where the words originated?
This approach to word study came from one of our leaders, one of our teachers. I prefer to call him a teacher because he was a master teacher, Imam Warithuddin Muhammad. And the context came from his reasoning that is based on scripture, but also his study of an insight into the material creation and the social world of man. And what word study does is it takes us back to the origin of words, or this method, the roots of words. Roots have meanings. I'm sorry, roots are the origin of words, not just the definitions. And the definitions that we use are never definite
Mm,
unless we know the root. That is, where did it come from?
mm-hmm,
And all language comes from two sources: creation first. Creation, we learn from creation. This is science. We learn all language, no matter what it is, from creation. And the other is revelation, from scriptural revelation. All of scriptural revelation, speaking universally, informs us with language that informs what comes from creation and from the language that man uses. So we have to be rooted. We have to be able to go back to the creation and understand where something comes from, even when we're using it in a definite way, because words change all the time. Every year, they produce a new dictionary with the changing meanings of words, with words that we can see that in the culture. We see each generation has its own language usage. When I listen to people now from Generation Z, I don't understand what they're talking about because they have a different language. It has evolved from their language environment, from the culture. Now, there's a lot there, but culture is really a language environment. It's the context, and you spoke of it very, 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 very well just a moment ago when you're talking about language in the sense of it as being the environment in which our mind evolves, our spirit and our mind. They both evolve out of a language environment. So it's important to be able to go back to the origin of words because the words change. And that's why we have to study them. In that case, gene speaks of the physical properties of the biological makeup that is determined by our genes that we know from science, that are constructed in terms of the chromosomes and all of that, that have to do with the kind of memory we're talking about, genetic memory. Yes, that's it. That's literally a physical representation of what we inherit, but not only in terms of our physical body and its composition, but something deeper that is in our soul, that is in our unconscious mind, and our subconscious mind that I think as we age and we understand, we make more meaning of consciously. But that memory is there. And that's why you asked me about that's what is inherent, that we can see all of us if we examine our lives and we're able to go back into our history. And we can see that those people that came before us are living in us as living memories, as influences in our own thinking that kept our life intact or enabled us to reclaim our life.
Mhm.
Okay, if that makes sense. So that's what genius is. But genius we think of as being just something that has to do with your intellect. But
Mhm.
no, it's something that's inherent in every human being. That's what I said.
Mhm.
And it's just the fullness of what is in our soul, every human soul, at the beginning.
Mhm.
And yes, it can be suppressed,
Mhm.
but it can also be brought out through education. In fact, that's what the word educate means. It means to bring out. It means to bring out what is already there.
That part gets me. Yeah. That part right there, I didn't mean to cut you because that part right there, I literally get chills because when I think about the fact when from the Islamic tradition it says that, God created Adam and taught him the names of all
All
things,
things. Yes.
right? So everything, we are Adam, as you said, right? We are Adam, the evolving human soul, male and female, universally evolving human soul, male and female. So if within us, as you're saying, right, inherently within us, there is knowledge that has to be brought out. Doesn't have to be brought to you, but it has to be like brought out.
Uh, you have to have certain abilities uh, that are learned
Mm-hmm.
that will aid each of us in paying attention to and using those potentials that are inherent,
Mm-hmm.
inborn, we're born with. But that's called information, reading, writing, arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
Those are skills that we learn, but their real purpose is to allow us to actually use those skills to bring out that inherent potential, which first begins as a spiritual potential. In fact, one of the hints, this is another word that's in the book, is in the word curiosity. That the experience in the world automatically evokes our curiosity. Curiosity, when you look up the word, it comes from the same Latin meaning of heart.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what we know in our spiritual sensitivity, the heart being a symbol of that. Before we know it in our rational mind, we know it in our spirit. Our intuition is just an extension of our spirit. And in fact, imagination is an extension of our spirit. And imagination is the first tool of intellect. So all of these levels of growing are inherent in our nature, but our soul knows from the beginning. In fact, it knows, we believe, everything there is to know because God created the potential in it. But potential has to be brought out.
Mm-hmm.
And potential is brought out by the circumstances we put it in. We have to put it in a situation, in a cultural environment, in a language environment where it can evolve.
Mm-hmm.
It can be put in a situation as we were when we were brought to this country in slavery and deprived of everything that we knew before we came here and put into a different cultural context. We had to evolve all over again, almost entirely.
Hmm.
That's what we're seeing now is the rightful inheritance. That's not just of some people, it's the rightful inheritance of every soul, male and female. We deprive the female of that sometimes in our culture. We say that females are not thinkers, but they are. The book makes that point. In fact, don't try to mess with your mother. when she tells you you've lost your common sense.
Mhm.
She knows before you know. It's good that you remember so you won't keep doing that.
Mhm. This is interesting to me because, I'm gonna say it the way that it hits me, right? Like, I think these types of books and this type of work like hits a lot of individual people on whatever it is that they're on, at that time. And so for me, I do a lot of work on introspection, a lot of soul work, a lot of redesigning or optimizing our lives, right? And one of the things that we talk about in my soul auditing work that I do is, like asking the question, like, what are you curious about? Like, what are you curious about? What are some curiosities that you have? Because for many people, you do not take the time or have the time, if you will, to engage in those curiosities. And then we wonder why our souls feel so broken, right? We wonder why we feel so disconnected from the world. We wonder why everything feels so heavy in life. And it's because the curiosities, part of it can be because, the curiosities that you mentioned that are connected to the heart. You said the curiosity is connected to the heart. So like the curiosities that we have that we do not engage with, right? Those are gateways, if you will, to deeper understandings of ourselves, of humanity, of society. But the way that our world is so structured, we have not given ourselves or taken the time, if you will, to engage in those. And so then it makes me really feel as though we're like dumbing down our entire society, because I think Allah gives certain people different curiosities so that the evolution of our society can go in different ways. Like my curiosities are not the same as yours, or not the same as, someone else's, but collectively, each of us being curious about certain things leads to certain evolutional, understandings. Can you see where I'm going with it? Or
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
man.
Um, our mind was made to see all of what God has created intellectually and rationally, and to understand it universally. And that's the other part of it. That is also something that is made clear in all the scriptures, in the sense of our father Abraham, who is the rational man, who saw that there was only one God. No matter how we look at it, no matter how much we argue, no matter how much dogmatic perception we bring to it, he is still one God. And that is almost a universal thing that we know, along with all the universals that go along with those things that we take as the commandments that are also in our soul, our inherent soul. The golden rule, I just use that as an example. Do unto others, you would have them do unto you. Thou
Mhm.
shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. That's in our nature.
Mhm.
And it goes on against our nature when we lose that focus. And that's what curiosity sometimes, that's how it's misused when we get the wrong focus, where
Mhm.
we want something that doesn't belong to us, or is not our rightful property, or something that we don't own. And we don't own any other human soul. We don't even own our own. It was given to us and it will be taken back from us. It's not even our own,
Mhm.
but in our confusion, let's put it that way, uh, we get to the point where we think we not only own ourselves and we can decide for ourselves do what we want to,
Mhm.
so we go off into things that are misleading, things that lead us off from those things that are productive, those things that I follow you very closely in your travels.
Mhm.
I see all of what you do. I know that you are a very educated person, not only spiritually but rationally, an anthropologist. And I follow your travels across the world when you take these groups of sisters and you go to these places, and I hear what you're saying, and that is the soul that is pursuing those things that are most productive for every human soul. that are going to establish every human soul in what is their rightful inheritance, which is the wisdom, which is the freedom to think.
Hmm. The freedom to think. All right, so let me see what time it is. If you guys have any questions, please type those into the chat box. We're going to go about 10 more minutes. And then also you can grab Dr. Hameed's book. If you go over to Amazon, you can just type in Adam, the Universally Human Evolving Soul, and it'll pop up. I also put the link on the screen so you can see that as well. And I would encourage you all to grab a copy of his book. It's something that makes you think, and it's something that, to be honest, I didn't know if I was smart enough to read it in the beginning. I said, "Whoa, my God!" I had to read like 10 times. Keep reading A, B, C. I was like, I know, A. So I had to put it together, but it's something that when you take the time, like to even just get one thing, it starts to kind of like, it starts to kind of open things up. I'll say it that way, and make you look at the world in a different way. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm so proud and happy about, Dr. Hameed, is that you didn't try to dumb down your messages, or you didn't try to like oversimplify it to a second grade level or such. You said, you know what, I'm an academic. I've dedicated decades on studying this information, and it's going to require some people to rise up just to even, get the language. And I think right now, a lot of, because I'm in the book world, right? A lot of times people try to simplify and make stuff like so palatable just for the general person that sometimes the depth gets gone. And I think I really appreciate the fact that kept it at the level of which it should be based off of all of this time. I want to read one part about like the way that you did this, the way the things that contributed to the ways that you conceived of the work. So you said this work seeks to promote the alignment of the natural world and the social world as an academic study, proposing the use of scriptural knowledge, scriptural reasoning of Al Quran, and the life example of the universal prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then you said the keys are given in the Quranic commentary of America's Imam Warfdi Muhammad, who you mentioned earlier, other scriptural narratives, and universals that inform the rational sciences. So let's take that first part, though, real quick. The alignment of the natural world and the social world. So, really, what do you want people to walk away with, Dr. Hameed? Like with this, you said proposing an academic study of the alignment of the natural world and the social world using scriptural reasoning. What is your real goal for conceptualizing all of this decades of knowledge into this first volume of your series?
It's to challenge us to study and to research, search again, to go back and to look at what our human origins are. In fact, our common human origins. Uh, that's why the book is dedicated to those who are dedicated to those things that are the rightful inheritance of every human soul, as-salihin, we say, that we pray for in our tradition every time we pray. We pray a prayer for every soul. And it is something that we have to reach up for. But that's growing up, isn't it? We have to stand up on our own 2 feet, and then we have to reach up to climb the metaphorical ladder of success. And yes, it's difficult. We may not reach all the levels of success in terms of achieving the highest education or the highest standards of living in terms of our income, but the seeking of knowledge is something that's inherent in human beings and something that we should pursue no matter who we are and no matter what circumstances we're in. And that goes back to what we said about Booker T. Washington, who had, and Dr. Carver in particular, both of whom were born as slaves and who had to struggle to even get an education,
Mm-hmm.
but achieve the highest levels of success. So we can't look down on any human soul in terms of those possibilities. So that's what I tried to do. And there's some of my friends who caution me about that, and I understand that. But our work has to be forward looking. It has to look forward to the future in terms of what we're preserving now so that those in the future can get it. That's what I meant when I said, I don't know my grandchildren, my great grandchildren. I don't have any yet, but I have dreamed of them. I've told my granddaughter about her child, and yet she's just 11. But now I don't know. Only God knows what
Mm-hmm.
is the reality of that. I can only tell you that as you get older, believe me, you see things that you can't explain, and it just cautions you to realize that as much as you know, you don't know very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so that's what that's a faith in the biggest sense is, but also faith in what our own potential is. And we're not to lose faith in our potential. That's why we're told, I think, in all the scriptures, to bow down by God, not to Him, but to Adam. What He has put in Adam, submit to that because He created that and He guides it.
Mm. Woo-wee! Okay, so let me read some of the comments real quick. So Miss Patty said, we need more of these types of discussions. She said, for me, it is helpful to keep a dictionary by my side. Me and you both, Miss Patty. Now that is freedom. So alhamdulillah, I thank you so much, for being willing to take time of your life, right, to do the work, to do the studies, because I can imagine it's not, it takes a sacrifice even just to put the time and effort into doing this level of study. It's not always easy to do the level of study as well. So I'm going to bring up the book real quick, and then you guys definitely go over, where did I put it? Go over and grab Dr. Hameed's book. Did I bring it up, or where did oh, here it is. Here it is. So you can see it there on the screen. Adam. Oh, tell us about the cover real quick.
It's from a place in the country of Bosnia Herzegovina, and for those of you who don't know, it's Bosnia is right across the Adriatic Sea from Italy, and it's a very beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country. Very, very rustic. Uh, this is a place that was a retreat going back thousands of years for people who are traveling actually along the Silk Road from Asia into Europe. And it was a retreat that was started as a place of reflection because of the fact that you have this huge mountain that you see in the cover, in the background, the brown that's looming above this river that comes from beneath this mountain range, the the Nark Alps, they're called,
Mm,
and the water comes from under this mountain in the springtime in this tremendous roar. And we don't know, they don't know where it comes from. It comes from some spring deep in the earth. Now, those of you who follow scriptural language and metaphysics, you know that what I'm talking about is the elements in nature: earth, air, and water. And what's being excited here is what we call the fire, that is the passion for learning. And this was a spiritual retreat. And I stood on the bridge where I took this picture from. It's a uh, uh, I'm trying to I'm trying to think of the name of the place, and it escapes me right now. But
mm-hmm,
it's just so, it's one of those places in nature that we find in many parts of the world, including not too far from where we are. I know you're a great fan of nature too. I follow your travel. You look up at these waterfalls.
Yes.
That's in my soul too. That's
Yes.
in my soul. And when you find those places, you know, like the native people knew, like people in every place around the world knew that this was not created by man and that its power was the sign, like everything in the universe,
Mm,
that this creation belongs to God.
wow.
That's why I chose that picture.
Thank you. I'm glad. I'm gonna mark this location down, and maybe on one of our soul auditing retreats, I may take some women there and see if we can find this exact spot and experience the roar, if we will. If we go in during that time, maybe we'll be able to experience the roar of it. But the connection, as you said, alignment of the natural world, and the spiritual world. Did you say natural world and spiritual world, right? Alignment of the natural world and the spiritual world is where we're trying to get. So, Dr. Hameed, final words to you. If anyone has questions, you all can drop those into the chat box. But final words from you, Dr. Hameed. Anything that you want us to take away?
Dear sister, I'm so grateful for your help.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
I know that some of the younger people I know are probably on here who are your age, and you all have to excuse me for calling you all young because I know you all fuss.
I take it. I don't know what those other people got any problems with.
You all have many more years left than we do, and that's what we're grateful for. That you all are being able to pick up the torch and to carry it forward, and that is this urge that's in every human soul.
Mm,
You all are representing. I don't know how old that language is in you all's everyday
yeah,
speech,
remember
but
that
you're
reference.
representing,
Mm,
and that's a relief for those of us who are who have been so desperate to see this world be a better place. And
mm,
yes, and the life is spiritual. It's not physical. It's not material. And the peace is spiritual. It's not spirit. It's not physical. It's not our physical environment that brings us peace. That peace has to be in our soul, and that's what those of us who are sincere in our devotion. That's what we wish for. So thank you so much,
oh, thank you.
and
Thank
may God, as we say, Allah continue to guide you.
you. I mean, thank you. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Dr. El-Amin. May Allah reward you for taking the time to put together this information, because this is not a vanity type of book. This is a book that you're putting out for society, right? To glean all of the time that you've dedicated to studying. Hopefully someone can, even if just one person really like picks it up and keeps going, then alhamdulillah, it's all worth it. So I'm going to ask all of you all to please head over to Amazon, pick up a copy of Dr. Hameed's book, and then leave a review for him, so that other people who are also deep thinkers, who are connected to the natural world and the spiritual world, and who want to understand more about the universally evolving human, Adam, male and female, we would love to be able to get this to them as well. Dr. Hameed is deciding, which ways that he wants to share this out, but really it's incumbent upon us to share these types of books. I used to do work and I used to feel kind of bad sometimes, like, oh, it's not a New York Times bestseller, or this or this. You start to compare yourself and you start to compare the things you do against what society is saying are the markers of success sometimes. And I'm sure many of you all have felt this as well, right? So you start to kind of compare, and then you start to minimalize what it is that you're doing because it hit some outside marker or whatever. But what I've learned from this, I think we're now at maybe 68, 69 authors that we've helped bring their works to life. And as I mentioned to Dr. Hameed, like I learned something from every single author. But one of the things that that we've learned from doing this is that each of us have a story to tell. Each of us have some things that we can learn, and each of us have places that we contribute to society and such. And so our goal is for us to take and what we learn and leave it in a way that somebody else can benefit. So I pray that Dr. Hameed, I pray that you are rewarded. I pray that this is on your good scale, right? We want our stuff to be on the right side. We want it to be on the good side. So I pray that all of these things that you do and all the other works that are going to come out, because this is the first in this series, right? Like you have some other books in this series, correct?
Uh, at least one other that I'm working on. I'm going to hit you up with it very,
Okay.
very soon. I I think I have the title "The Writing Is the Wall,"
Mm.
and the heavens have been opened as if there were doors.
Woo. See, this is what I'm talking about. The writing is the wall, and the heavens have been opened as if they were doors. All right. I got my mind ready now. I'm ready now to get into it. So alhamdulillah. Dr. Hamid, just real quick, I feel like you need to have like a I know you have your study group, but I feel like it would be really nice to have some type of, even if it was once a month, you got some people together that wanted to study more about these types of concepts, or like where do you suggest people that do want to think very deeply and kind of explore more of these concepts, how should they get support?
We have been invited just recently to work with Community-Wide Shura Conference. I'm sure you're familiar with their work. They've been around for a long time.
Mm-mm.
They do a lot of interfaith work, and they reach out to the general public across the country. And we are engaging in these conversations with the work group, which I represent, the Sister Clara Muhammad Consortium uh, Foundation, Memorial Education Foundation, and Consortium Work Group. And yes, there's a group of us that are working to share this information. And this work that I've put forward in the book actually is from that source. It's from that work that's been going on for 21 years. So it's not really mine. That's why I called it. That's why I call myself the author scribe, because I've learned from those who are engaged in doing this work, including from you, my dear sister. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank a lot for you.
Thank you.
And thank a lot. I know your parents set an excellent example for all of us too. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. So that is our Sunday Legacy Keepers Elders Speak conversation. So you all are going to head on over to Amazon, grab the book, type in the name Adam, the Universally Evolving Human Soul, and the book will come up. Grab a copy and then leave a review for Dr. Hameed, inshallah. And I will put his email address in the comments, I think, later. And if you have any thoughts, you can email him, or I'll tag him as well. Maybe you can just send him a message or so as well. All right. Thank you, Dr. Hamid. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.